Welcome to the Stoa. The Stoa is a digital campfire where we cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of what's happening now. Okay, check-ins. I am 15% nervous. It just jumped up to 17% when I said that, which is interesting. There's a sort of like a pain in this area. I have a story behind that. And I just feel really calm other than that. Welcome to the Stoa. I am the steward of the Stoa, Peter Lindbergh, and the Stoa is a place for us to cohere and dialogue about what matters most at the knife's edge of this moment. And today we have a very, very special guest and a dear friend of mine, Jasna. I probably pronounced that wrong. I was practicing. Yeah, I wouldn't even try it again. But she's a trainee at the Monastic Academy. And I'll let her explain what the Monastic Academy is. And she's been going on retreats there, and she's on a longer retreat this time. She's there right now. And today she's going to be talking about her experience about living in a monastery during a pandemic. And beyond that, I think I'll just let Jasna introduce herself in the Monastic Academy and what she's going to talk about today. How it's going to work is Jasna will share her thoughts, and then we'll open up to Q&A. I'll warm her up in the room with some questions. And if you have a question for Jasna, just write it in the chat box. And I will call on you to unmute yourself. If you want me to read on your behalf, just indicate that in the chat box as well. So that being said, I will allow everyone to unmute themselves. And Jasna, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And it's Todorovich. Hi, so my name is Jasna, and I'm a trainee at the Monastic Academy, which is a modern monastery based in Lowell, Vermont. So we're a training center that combines a lot of different modalities, training modalities, and the way that I like to think about it is that we're a training center for creating better people. That has been kind of my personal experience of it and my view of what I've observed from the people who have gone through this program. So we combine traditional wisdom practices, Buddhism. We have a head teacher who's a Zen monk. We're not a Zen monastery. He doesn't teach Zen, but he is a Zen monk. So we do a lot of practices like meditation, like several hours of meditation per day, and we're on a very strict schedule. But we also combine that with a lot of real world work, because training for enlightenment is very nice and good. But if you're not using that to enact real change in the world, then what are you doing, kind of? And I had all sorts of things that I was thinking about saying, and then it just kind of ballooned. And I decided that probably the best thing to do would be to answer questions rather than just trying to talk for a long time. I want to note that, so we have this Vermont location, then we also have a California location, and I did not realize that the California location would be calling into this call, and they're all watching right now, which is a little nerve-wracking. Hi guys, they're waving. Yeah, so I think maybe I'll open it to, I don't know if Peter, you had some starting questions that you wanted to do, or if anyone had any questions at all, and we can kind of weave a story or a narrative through that.
Yeah, I can ask a few opening questions. And while I ask Jasna those questions, just feel free to write it down in the chat box, and then I can call on you and you can unmute yourself. So someone like myself who sort of is like, I like being a cowboy. a spiritual cowboy and do my own thing, but I'm also drawn to a monastic life. So I'm in the in-between space. And I imagine a lot of people are like that too. They like their own independence, their own way of doing things, but they want to have some guidance in a monastery setting. So what would you say in order to, I wouldn't say sell it, but just to kind of give them enough information so they can make the wisest choice?
Make the wisest choice about whether this type of training would be useful to them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to make the claim that it's for like absolutely everyone. I think that can be a dangerous claim to make. What I have found is that, so I have been connected with the organization for about 4 years, but it's really only in the past year that I've started doing more intensive training. And I was resistant for a long time to, doing it the way that it is here, because, how do I know that this is actually the best way? And this kind of sucks. You have to wake up early and you have to do all these annoying things and you have to live with annoying people and you have to just like deal with it. And like, surely there's a better way to do this. And maybe there is, but the thing is, while I'm here, the best way to make use of all of this is to throw myself in and to trust it for the duration that I'm here. And when I started doing that, when I stopped thinking about like, oh, this thing is wrong. If they did it this other way, then it would be better. I'm not going to trust this organization until they do it this right, better way. When I kind of, this isn't really a way to convince people, I suppose, but like when I was able to set that aside and say like, okay, well, I'm here and it is done this way. And so I should participate fully and get whatever I can from this. That really made a big difference. And the thing is, it's not like you come here and then you're stuck here forever. You come here and you do the training and you leave at some point. Maybe you're here for a week, maybe you're here for a year. The longest person who's been here has been here for 5 years, I think. But really there is that element of like, yeah, at some point it was like a frustration at myself where I was like, why am I here if I'm not throwing myself in? Like, how can I get the most benefit of this training if I'm constantly second guessing it? Right.
And what transformational experiences have you had being there and ones that other people have had?
It's a really hard one, not because there isn't an answer, but because there isn't a neat answer to it.
We prefer things not to be neat here at the Stoa, so feel free to.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just taking some time to think of how to put it into words, because I mean I can talk about specific experiences, but that's not actually answering the spirit of the question, I think. I think the fact is that, okay, so I used to live my life in a pretty nice way. I, have good friends. I have a successful career. I'm close with people. I'm close with my family. I enjoy my work. It's fun. It's challenging. It's nice. I work in software. I've worked in software for the past 10 years. And then at some point through doing this training and kind of coming out of it, I was living here a year ago. I was living here for 2 months. I was doing the co-working program here, which is basically like you come here, you live on the schedule, but during the day you do your own work. So I did that for 2 months. And when I left, I was trying to think about what I wanted to do next. And there's a way in which all of the nice things that have been happening in my life just felt like they weren't actually moving me towards my quote unquote highest aspiration. I don't know exactly what highest aspiration means here, but it's just like some sort of meaning, some sort of like is doing, if I just live my life like following my career and like having nice friendships and like enjoying myself, is that what I want to be doing? And it's not a bad life. It was very nice. But there was the sense that this sort of shift in understanding that actually there can be so much more to my life, and I can do so much more. And kind of like almost this like, my God, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I just do more of this training and like just become more and more of a better person and engage in the world more fully and really, yeah, really move towards what feels meaningful and good. Does that answer the question?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
But I am noticing.
It feels a little vague.
I imagine some of it might come out again because we have some excellent questions coming in the chat box, better than what I could ask. So, yeah, this might be, you touched on it a little bit, but maybe Travis, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, you touched on this a little bit, Jasna, but how did you come to practice at the Monastic Academy? Maybe you could go into more like how you found it and what kind of steps did you take to introduce yourself to it before kind of taking a deep dive into it.
Yeah, totally. This story tends to surprise people. So I learned of the Monastic Academy because I think I can see him smiling, because a very good friend of mine who I was working with at this company called Interaxon, we made this brain sensing headband that reads your brain waves and gives you real-time feedback on what your brain is doing. So I had a very good friend there who one day decided to leave and move to a monastery forever. And I was like, what are you doing? This is the weirdest decision you've made so far. Like, this makes no sense. Your life is so good here. You're just running away. Like, quit it. Please stay. But he left. And I was upset and angry. And maybe 8 months later, I went to go visit him. And I was very skeptical of the entire thing. I was just like, what is this cult that took my friend away? And I wanted to see if, you know, he was still the same person, and like, if these are people who I can trust to take care of him. So I came to visit for like a day and a half, and it was pretty weird. It was a weird place. And I got to have breakfast with the head teacher, because when guests come, generally they get to have like tea or breakfast or something with the head teacher. And at that point I had been meditating for maybe about a year or so, maybe a little more. And I was kind of like, I was convinced by, you know, like the health benefits of meditation. It's like, it's good for mental health and all of that. But I was kind of like, okay, that's nice, but like, really, a monastery? Like, that's a bit extreme. So I talked with the head teacher, and it was the first time that someone had actually been able to answer my sort of skepticisms and my questions and my hesitations about meditation in a way that I was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that seems reasonable. So I left, and I was like, okay, this place is maybe not awful. I don't know if I like it, but it's not what I was afraid of. And then over the years, I just kind of kept visiting every once in a while, maybe like every few months, or like once or twice a year or something, each time for a little bit longer. Because there was just like, there was something drawing me to it, but it was still pretty kind of like arm's length, I think. And over time, I got to make friends with some of the people going through the program, and I got to see the changes that were happening in them and the way that the organization worked. And like one of the things that I was afraid of is that they would be, you would think of a monastery as being something that's like very separate from the world and like not impacted by it and not impacting it, which this organization is absolutely not doing. Like the entire point of this training is so that we can become more effective people in the world. And so I grew to see that and to trust it more. And then in, what was it, 2017 or 2018, one of those years. I spent a year working in the cryptocurrency world, and I was just like, I had a crazy year. I was just like constantly traveling between different continents, just like living as a nomad, which was beautiful but exhausting. And I completely burned myself out. And then I left that job, and I thought, oh, I know the perfect place to go to kind of like reset myself. And I decided that I would go to the Monastic Academy for 2 months, or well, for some amount of time, which ended up being 2 months. And that was when I was doing the co-working program. And that was really when things shifted for me, where I was like, oh, there's like, this is a lot more than just like better mental health. This is a really important, really fundamental type of training that I have never seen anywhere else. I mean, I'm sure other places do things like this, but I had not been exposed to anything like this. And that was kind of when I realized that at this point in my life, this is the best possible thing that I could be doing. And there's all sorts of other things that, you know, would be interesting and good. And the thing is that like, all those other things that I want to do, I can still do them after doing this training. That was kind of my thinking at that point, where it's like, I can do those things now, or I can like spend a year making myself into a more badass person and then do those things even better than I would do them now. And actually my thinking has since shifted. I mean, that is still true, but I actually now am believing that what I want to be doing is more of this training and trying to bring it, make it sort of more accessible to more people. So I'm actually in the process of creating a Canadian branch of the Monastic Academy near Toronto, very early stages. But yeah, I basically came to the conclusion or the belief that this type of training is so important and so vital, and nothing else seemed, right now at least, nothing else seemed worthwhile. Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. So we have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to use my discernment. We're not going to go in the order that they came in, and everyone might not have a chance to ask their question. So let's go with Nicholas. You have two good questions. Feel which one you'd like to ask, and feel free to ask it.
Hi, Jasna. Thank you so much for.
Hi.
I've had an interest in the Monastic Academy for some time now, through Daniel Thorson's podcast. And anyway, a couple of the questions that I had, and you feel free to use your discernment to decide which one you want to answer, or both, and incorporate them in. The first one was, what is a day in the life of a trainee at the academy? Maybe you were going to go into that anyway. The second one is, what are the greatest challenges that you have faced or are facing during your practice? And what changes have you noticed in yourself in overcoming them?
Sure. So day in the life, I can kind of go over quickly. And I also have a blog post from about a year ago that basically goes through the daily schedule and has like pictures of the place and stuff. So I'll just go through it quickly now, but if you want more details, I don't know, Peter, if you're able to find that blog post somehow and post it in chat or something, but we can figure that out. So daily schedule is start chanting at 4:40 a.m. Are you writing this down?
Why not?
Sure, yeah. You can also find this on the website, but you're welcome to write it down. So start chanting at 4:40, then at 5:30 a.m. is an hour of meditation. And during this time, we also have interviews with the teacher. So what happens is that one person at a time goes into the interview room with the teacher, and they demonstrate or discuss their practice. It's a time to have one-on-one time, and it's really, from what I understand, it's really different for every person, like what that means. Sometimes for me, it's like actual full-on discussions with the teacher. Other times I just sit there quietly breathing and demonstrating my practice. Sometimes he'll ask questions and I'll answer some in words. Sometimes he'll ask questions and I will just answer with the way that I'm breathing, which might sound ridiculous. It's really not, I promise. So that's 5:30 to 6:30. Then 6:30 to 7:30 is the exercise period. So we exercise every day. You choose your own exercises. There's no like mandatory specific thing that you need to be doing, but you do need to be exercising in some way. Then it's breakfast for, I don't know, 40 minutes maybe. And then at, I'll say 8:15 or something. Is that right? Yeah, 8:15-ish, we start our workday. So between that and 12:35, we're just working, and that depends on like what the individual roles are. Some people are working on like buildings and grounds, and right now we're like building a path from the Zendo to the main building, or like doing laundry or whatever. People are doing marketing, communications. We're in the process of doing the engineering for the monastic village, which we're building. There's going to be like an area on the grounds where like people are going to build their own houses and like live, sort of not doing the monastic training, but living in a monastic community. So some people are doing communications around that. Anyway, so that's just a work period. 12:35 is lunch. Is that right? Yeah. 1:15 is a chore period for 45 minutes. And then between 2 and 5 is free time. Except that there's a 30-minute period within that free time where you need to be doing sutra study, which is you're basically like studying the ancient texts. So for half an hour every day, but you can choose when that is within that time. And then, is that right? Yeah. And then the evening from 5 until 6:30 is a different thing depending on the day. Sometimes we do more work. Sometimes it's circling practice. Circling is a type of authentic relating practice. Sometimes we'll do trauma healing, like bioemotive. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's one of the sort of training modalities that we do here, or one of the things that we do to help our training is emotional clearing and emotional processing. Sometimes we'll do workshops, sovereignty workshops, or other things. Sometimes we'll do embodiment practices. Sometimes we'll do more meditation. So that's like the period between 5 and 6:30 is pretty much different every day. 6:30 we do group sutra study, which is basically one person presents something that they've been reading about, and then there's like a sort of group discussion about it. 7 until 8:30 we do sitting meditation again with interviews. So people go in, talk to the teacher. I think most of the time people get to, maybe not, but you get to talk to the teacher every day or two in general. And on retreat, on full retreat weeks, it's every day generally. And then 8:30 p.m. we chant for about 15 minutes, and then it's bedtime. And then, so that's called like responsibility weeks. So most of the month is a responsibility period. And then we have 1 week of the month that is what's called the awakening period, or people would call it a retreat. And the way the schedule is different for that one is just like replace pretty much everything with meditation. Yeah. Your other questions. One was something about what's the most challenging thing. I mean, there's a lot that's challenging. I think one of the most challenging things is, and the most beautiful things, is actually living in community, because you're living and training and working and eating and everything with the same people, and you have conflicts, and you can't get away from them. Like one of the reasons that actually this training is so profound is that you can't get away from your problems, and you just have to deal with them. You can't, like, if there's someone you dislike, you can't avoid them because you live with them, you work with them, you train with them, you're around them. And so there's a really, there's a real beauty to that, because you're committed to loving and supporting these people and still clashing with them. You know, like it's not about like being you can't pretend, you can only pretend to like someone for so long, you know? So like all the stuff comes out and you kind of support each other through it. And that's really difficult and probably one of the most growing experiences of this entire place. And it's one of the things that makes a real difference between like meditating on your own a lot and meditating in community. It's, yeah.
Thank you. And I guess just the last thing, what changes have you noticed in yourself in overcoming that challenge of living in community?
Yeah, that one, I'm so much more comfortable now just telling people what I think or how I feel, like when I disagree with them about something, and it just doesn't feel like that big a deal anymore. It does sometimes, but like, I actually distinctly remember a time, it was more than a year ago. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember a time when like someone said something to me and I just kind of like smiled and was like, ah, ah. And then internally I was like, what? Like, I completely disagree with everything that you're saying, but like, I don't know, like, I'm feeling uncomfortable with the situation and want to leave. Like that was internally my experience, but externally I just kind of like smiled and pretended. Whereas now that seems like not even a thing. Like it's just easy for me now. Like when someone says something, I can just be like, oh, I disagree with that. Or like that bothers me for like this and this reason. And it's not like some sort of like clash or conflict. It's actually just sort of like lowering that resistance of like the disagreements are okay, that like judgment is okay. It's okay for me to say like, hey, I'm judging you right now, or like I feel unsafe with you right now, or something like that, and I can trust that that's actually going to be received in a certain way, and that that person is going to want to like be with me in that interaction. And or maybe they won't, maybe they will have their own freak out and walk away, and then like we'll deal with it later or something.
So I'm
Mhm.
sorry, I'm parsing this as toggling or reducing the opacity of the membrane between your inner world and your outer experience.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
Contributes to a greater authenticity.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it.
Cool. Some great questions coming in. Jane just had one, which I'm personally curious about.
Hi. Yeah, I'd like to ask about the experience of living in a monastic lifestyle. What lessons can the general public take from that about living in lockdown? And then that further becomes a change in our lives once we come out of lockdown and after COVID-19 is no longer the huge problem that it currently is. I'd really like to hear about what lessons do you think we could take?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things, so there's a couple of things that I think are really have been extremely useful and beneficial for us in living through this crisis. And I'll say, actually, we got infected with COVID in early March. So we like that went through the monastery. Everyone is fine. But one of the really beautiful things about it is the fact that we live in community. And so we were able to take care of each other. And so much of what is happening right now is that people are isolated alone in their homes. And we have, beautiful things happening, like people are Zooming so much more. I'm talking to my family so much more than ever before, which is really lovely. But there is something really profound about the fact that we were living in community. We didn't have to feel that extreme loneliness that I think a lot of people are feeling right now. And I think that it speaks to, I know that there's a lot of people who really like the idea of community living, like creating like shared community houses or like little villages with all your friends and stuff. But I think it's really coming a lot more alive for people now from like what I've seen, like discussions that I've seen online. everyone is, or not everyone, but a lot of people are saying like, let's, go to a commune, let's build our own thing. And monasteries are really like a model of that. They're a model of a community living together. And then the other thing, well, yeah, so I mean, I think for that one, just more concisely, is basically like living in community has a lot of really important benefits. And at a time like this, it's especially important. And, when certain people were very sick, there were other people who were less sick who were able to take care of them, rather than people just kind of being cooped up at home. And the other thing is that throughout all this, we were still, like we shifted our schedule a bit, so that we could like get more rest and stuff, but we were still practicing every day for several hours, meditating, and it really, I think, helped us stay a lot more grounded, and a lot more able to process the information without, not to say that like we weren't going nuts, because in many ways we were, but it really was beneficial to have like a strong meditation practice. And the thing is, during that time especially, our teacher was really guiding us to deal with the problem of death. This is what all of us are facing right now, the fact that we're going to die, that the people who we love are going to die. And that's a really hard thing to face, and the entire world right now is facing that. And what contemplative traditions, or at least Buddhism, does largely, or not largely, but in a very big way, is make you face your own death, make you face your mortality, make you face the fact that you're going to get old, that you're going to get sick, that everyone you love will die. And I'm laughing because I'm just like remembering some of the meditation, some of the guidances that our teacher did, where like literally we would just sit for an hour and contemplate death. And so we use this opportunity to really, because it's happening anyway. We're dealing with the fact that we're going to die, or maybe we're not dealing with it, but we're facing the fact that we're going to die. So we might as well, step in and do it fully. So that was, I think, another thing that was really important about living monastically, is the fact that we were able to do that. And I'm thinking of some other things, but they're kind of like half formed, so I think I'll leave them for now.
Cool. Tanya, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, because you're starting this maple up in Canada, what was the what stirred you to do that? What motivated you? And if there's a vision there, or and there's the second part to the question when you were talking about the day-to-day things that come up when people are living in close quarters and can't get away from each other. I'm just curious what questions and learning has come up for you with holding whatever's motivating you, and then that day-to-day reality.
Yeah. So for what motivated me, it was a little bit of a snowball effect. I came back from the Monastic Academy. So I was here for 2 months and then I left, and I knew that I wanted to come back for more training, but it wasn't the right time for me at that point. There were some family things that I wanted to do in Toronto for a little while. And I was just kind of like thinking about what I wanted to do next. And at that point, I didn't have a place to live because, well, coincidentally, I had moved out of my apartment a few months earlier. And because I knew that I was going to be coming back to the Monastic Academy, I kind of didn't want to find like a 1-year lease somewhere or something like that. And then I thought, well, if I buy a place, then I can like rent it out while I'm gone, and I'm not, but like it was all just like a bunch of like logistical stuff. And then I was like, wait, I can buy a property somewhere outside of the city which would be really lovely. And I had been living nomadically for a year before that anyway, so living outside of the city wasn't that different from just like, you know, constantly traveling or something, just as far as like seeing my friends in the city. And then it was like, oh, I could, places in the city are a lot more expensive than places outside of the city. And so I started looking at places like, oh, I could actually get a pretty big place. And at some point in the future, something will magically happen and people from the Monastic Academy will want to expand to Canada, and then I can give them this property or like this location, and they can do it there. And then very quickly it was like, it's not going to be them magically doing it. I should just like start that process. And it was like renovating it to be like the right thing. And it was just like kind of just taking one step at a time, and then each thing snowballed, and then eventually eventually it started becoming a real thing. And I was like, well, I can definitely be like the executive director of this. Like I'm capable of doing that. But I had this conversation with my teacher, and he was like, well, a Monastic Academy needs a teacher, so who's going to be the teacher? And I was like, oh, well, not oh, because I mean, I already knew that was a thing, but I was like, oh, I see. So there's no one. So I'm the only option. I'm a terrible option, but you can train me. And maybe someday I will be able to be a teacher, and maybe not, I don't know. But we basically came to the agreement that the thing that would make sense is for me to do a lot more intensive training and move towards becoming a teacher. But the whole thing really started with like, I don't want to find a place to rent. And every step of the way felt like the right thing, but it was very much like, there's a lot of different directions that this could go in, and I'm not gonna worry about it too much. I know the general direction that I want, and I'm gonna like start taking steps in that direction, and it's gonna end up somewhere else, but that's fine. And it's been incredible. Like it's this community has formed around it that is just mind-blowing. Like there's people who hear about what I'm doing and just like jump in and want to help. And like I'm, yeah, like I don't understand how to process how, you know, quote unquote successful it's already been in that like this big community has already formed around it, and so many people are helping in so many ways. And then I'm not actually sure how to tie into your second question. I don't know if you want to maybe ask it again, or.
Feels like you're starting to, in describing the experience that's been emerging, that you've been having with people on the ground.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, my experience has basically been that like if I believe in this thing and I just like take steps towards making it happen, other people get excited about it too, and then they take steps towards making it happen. And like I'm not necessarily wanting to make it just like this thing that I want it to be. I want it to be like co-created by the community. So yeah, that part has been just mind-blowing to me, honestly.
Cool. Maggie, you had a few questions.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Jasna, for sharing everything so far. I'll try to link some of my questions with others that I've read that I think are related. I was interested in whether you felt Maple could fit under the engaged Buddhism movement. And I kind of want to link this to other people asking around like impact of Maple and how you view their theory of change, and if there's other ways of impact that they conceive of that's both like political but also beyond social and political change, which is kind of how I understand engaged Buddhism. And then my second question, you can answer either or, was just around your earlier comment about this like frank, radical honesty you've been able to cultivate, and how you kind of have less reservation to speak your truth. And I was just curious whether you ever felt that refraining from sharing what is honestly coming up for you can be a kinder, more compassionate thing to do.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, I'll answer the second one first. And yeah, definitely, it's not just about like being unfiltered. So in Buddhism, there's this thing called the Eightfold Path, which I know you and I have talked about a little bit. And one of the things in the Eightfold Path is right speech. And right speech does mean being truthful, but it also means like saying things at the right time, and saying things kindly, and it also means other things. But I think one of the things about doing this type of training is that ideally, over time, you start becoming less reactive. And so it actually becomes a lot easier to talk about like the difficult things that are coming up or the disagreements or something like that, because you're not necessarily saying them from an angry place. If the reaction that you're having is anger, just using that as an example. And so there is a way to speak your truth without that necessarily being some sort of difficult or traumatizing experience for the person who's hearing it. Not that you can, control everything about how someone will receive it, but yeah, I definitely don't want it to come off as like always just blurting out whatever is on your mind and being like, yeah, but I'm practicing. That's not exactly the point. And so then for the first question, I've heard a bit about engaged Buddhism, but I don't really know like the definition of that. That's a Thich Nhat Hanh thing, right?
Yeah, like I guess he's the recent person who's been advocating it, but it comes from I think a history of Buddhists who wanted to reclaim the political power that some scholars at least have claimed was stripped after the Cold War era. And when brought to the West, the depoliticization of Buddhism was seen as one of the outcomes, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't have a lot of the academic background on that, so like I can kind of answer in some sort of like my own interpretation of things, but yeah, I feel like my answer won't quite be like satisfying exactly the question as posed. But I think if I take the question more broadly as like, what is it that Maple is actually doing that is making a difference in the world? So I mean, there's like the specific easy things to point to are like when we go to protests or something, or like the causes that we support and things like that. But that's actually the less interesting stuff, I think. Although that's important too. But the way that I see it is I want to be careful about how I put this. A lot of our problems in the world start a lot earlier than we think. And the training that we're doing at Maple, part of it at least, is in trying to look at the foundations of where our problems start. So part of why the meditation practice is so important is that you kind of, you still everything over time, and then you start to see like all the little things that are urging you towards doing certain things, making certain decisions that like are very easy to rationalize, but are actually like something much more subtle that's happening in your mind. And basically by changing this foundation, we change ourselves. Like by doing this practice, you change yourself into being someone who is able to function from a more I don't want to say grounded place because that's not exactly it, but a more wise place, a less reactive place. And everything snowballs from there. All the little decisions that you make turn into big decisions. And, you know, the way that we live our days is the way that we live our lives. And I don't mean to say that like it's completely impossible, or like that the only thing we need to be doing is working on ourselves and that will change the world. Like we have to be working, you know, bottom up and top down. We have to be looking at systems level things. But I do personally believe that so I'm just trying to think of the right words here. You know how there's like, we can do like all sorts of like brain games and stuff to like make our brains better, you know, like you do Sudoku puzzles and that makes you be better at math and better at focusing and whatever else. There is a more fundamental type of training that we can be doing. And we can basically create ourselves into people who have minds that like the types of minds that can actually solve problems without creating new ones, or at least making fewer new ones. And so that's one way of looking at it. Looking at it a little bit more, I don't know, abstractly, one of the things that we talk about here at Maple is these three pillars of wisdom, love, and power. And what we'll often say is that the people who have wisdom and love often don't want power, and the people who have power often don't have wisdom and love. And so what we're trying to do is train leaders who are wise, loving, and powerful. So, which might mean taking people who are powerful and building up their wisdom and building up their love, or it might mean taking people who have wisdom, or have some wisdom, have some love, and giving them more power. And so part of like the sort of more practical stuff that Maple does is actually empower people to do a lot of things first within the organization. Like we're a nonprofit, and so people have to have all sorts of roles within the organization. Someone will be doing fundraising, someone will be doing, you know, bookkeeping, kitchen management, all of that. And so like people will come in and like not have certain real world skills, and then those they get built up, and they actually are put into leadership positions where they're completely out of their depth. Like we put people into positions where they will basically not necessarily fail, but they will struggle. And failure is okay, struggling is okay, they're supported all through it. But it's basically like getting that type of real world training in addition to the contemplative training, and like really like holding those two aspects together. That's why we talk about awakening and responsibility. Like those are two pillars of Maple that like one side is not enough. You have to actually be building up both, and they have to be informing each other.
Cool. So let's see here. Ooh.
I'm gonna turn my light on.
Okay, so Yuli, if you could ask your question. You had a few, I think.
Thank you. I was just typing out another one right now. Yeah, tough call which one I want to go for. So I'm going to list them out and leave it to Jasna to decide.
How about you just ask one, because we don't have that much time. So just,
Sure.
yeah. Which one
Then
feels most alive?
Yeah, I'll opt for. Jasna, can you tell us a little bit about best practices and monastic philosophy on how to deal with the uncertainty of how much time you should be spending on training yourself to become a more badass person, and then putting that badass to work? So you're gonna probably go through a cyclical check-in process to say, okay, I needed more training at this time. I got more training. Now I can go do some stuff. I'm doing some stuff. I'm noticing I could probably use more training. How do you balance that? What are the checks to make sure that, this is working for you? Is this a solo journey for you? or does the monastic practice help? Do people there help? Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, it is absolutely not a solo journey, and it can't be, I think. So like, even as you were saying your question, like your question is, how do you know when these certain things happen or when you need a certain thing? And the first thing that was coming to mind was like, I mean, there is a way in which I can, you know, make those decisions, and maybe they'll be right and maybe they'll be wrong, but having a teacher is actually a really, really vital part of doing this. And that's a hard thing, because like having that type of trusting relationship with someone is very difficult. And it took me years to actually be able to trust Soryu, the head teacher here, enough to, you know, step into full training with him. But there really is that level of trust where like, I mean, he has been doing this for a long time, and he is like, I do actually trust his wisdom in guiding me along the right path. And so some part of it, that is just like, find someone who is better than you and like have them tell you. But and like, I do mean that, and also I know that that's like not really how it can always be. Some of it is honestly just informed by necessity. Probably it would be better to just like, if I could take a month or 3 months or something and just meditate, probably that will be more useful than me doing anything else for those 3 months. I do genuinely believe that, but that's not really feasible. You know, like, I still have to be working in the world. I still have to be like helping the organization and all of that. So some of it really is just informed by what is it that needs to happen. What is it that I need to do to like maintain my livelihood? And that's actually a really good question, because there's actually a lot that can fall away that we think can't. But one thing that what is it that he said? I'll butcher it, so I don't know if this is exactly what Soryu said, but he said something along the lines of like, if you're spending more time on social media than you are listening to Dharma talks, then social media is your teacher. Like, that is, and that, like, that's just a statement of fact. I think like the thing that you surround yourself with is the thing that's going to influence you the most. The people that you surround yourself are the people who are going to influence you the most. And so, like, in my view, if I want to be a specific type of person, then I need to surround myself with other people who are working towards that as well. And that, like, it can't be a lonesome journey. You could do that on your own, but why would you? Like, it's so much harder. So I don't think that actually fully that answers your question exactly as posed, but I think that's the answer that I have.
I'm thankful for it. I do have a really burning follow-up. Peter, thumbs up if that's okay. Thank you. You know, in thinking about how we can construct ourselves, it at least appears to me, at the very least, that monastic practices are taking age-old wisdom on a whole slew of different ways of improving yourself, right? You can change your social context, you can change your social ties, you can change your basic physiology and how much you exercise, how much you sleep, what kind of postures you sit in, how comfortable is your brain with comfort and discomfort, how does it feel about things, what types of neural patterns are you encoding and practicing, what are you building up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so because, and there is an enormous amount of wisdom in these practices, but I wonder, I mean, what are there, I guess my question for you is, are there also more modern insights that you're aiming to draw from? And in particular, not for the sake of being modern, but obviously for the sake of, you know, how is it that life today is different in a specific way that means you have to tweak the kind of training you're doing in order to actually, get optimal flourishing out of the human being as you improve one?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the practices that we do here are actually not ancient. So like circling is a big one. Circling is, sometimes we call it social meditation, but it's basically like, there's this quote, I think by Ram Dass, that's, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. So like, the fact is, like, there is some way to, you can be like blissful and wonderful, and things can be great when you're sitting alone on the cushion, but that's really put into practice in relationship. And so we do these circling practices together to kind of like really test out that our ability to be present with each other and with ourselves. And so this is a much more modern thing. I don't remember when circling came about. I want to say in the 90s. And then there's emotional clearing stuff, the bioemotive practice. We are, as human beings in this modern world, carrying around so much emotional trauma, like lowercase t, and in many cases uppercase t. We are extremely impacted by things and then kind of not processing that. You kind of just like hold yourself together, zip yourself up and keep going. And this is really like makes it extremely difficult to go through life and be happy. But we kind of all just do it as a society. It's so much that we don't actually quite realize it. And so emotional clearing and like emotional processing type things I think are extremely vital practices that are much more modern. I don't want to say like people in the past didn't need them. I don't know what it was like at that point. But that's sort of one of the more modern things that we're pulling in. And then I talked a bit about how like we're placed in different roles within the monastery. Like we're basically getting like business type training and startup type training. And that's the type of stuff that really is necessary if you want to actually go out into the world and do things ever. Because you can't just be a monk who is completely separate from everything that's going on in the world. You might become wonderfully enlightened, and then what? If you don't know how to, keep books or like have, I don't know, conversations. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think, thank you.
Cool. So we're at the hour mark, so we're going to end questions there. Before I make any closing thoughts, Jasna, do you have any kind of final statements of anything really?
Well, so if you want to, I do have that blog post from a while ago that talks about like daily life at the Monastic Academy. So if people are interested in that, they can seek that out. There's the Emerge podcast, which is hosted by one of the monastics here. Some of the episodes in that also go into things about monastic life, not many of them, but some. I think the most recent one was an interview with our head teacher. So that one is really quite wonderful. I recommend listening to that one. There's a paper that a past resident wrote for, I think, his master's thesis. It's called Monasteries of the Future. That one's really interesting if anyone is interested in looking that up. Our website is the monastic, or no, wait, it's, oh no, monasticacademy.org. Yeah,
Isn't
I
it
don't think I said
.com?
the.
I posted one that says .com. I hope that's the right one.
Click on it and see, I don't know. Maybe just Google Monastic Academy.
Yeah, this is it.
I think both of them work, I think.
Yeah, this is it.
I'm not sure which one redirects to the other. Oh, great. Seishin just posted a great blog post by another monastic here called Tashin. That's all that's coming to me right now. I'm on Twitter, and if people have more questions, I don't want to make that promise because I don't actually have that much free time here, but like, I was going to say if you have more questions, ask me on Twitter, but I don't know that I will actually be able to answer them, but feel free to ask them. And I'll try to get to them. Every day we have 3 hours of free time. The rest of the time is all structured, and Mondays are our free days. So those are the times when I can actually do non-monastery things.
Yeah. Very cool. So I'll make some closing announcements in a moment, but Jasna, thanks so much for coming on today. It was greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Hope to have you back, and we'll double click on that discussion. Are you cool to stay on the call just for 5 more minutes? After everyone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So we can chat,
Yeah.
debrief. So upcoming events, you can go to the website, thestoa.ca. We have a wisdom gym here. Recurring events happens every week. We have about 11 so far, so you can just check it. We have like Socratic speed dating, existential dance parties, freestyling through a pandemic, breath work, stoic breath, lots of cool stuff. You can RSVP there, also on meetup.com. But yeah, RSVP on the website for now. And we also have one-off events. We only have 3 this week. The next one is Human Systems Live Action Redesign. That's on, was that April 30th is a Thursday, right? Yeah, Thursday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. So Joe Edelman's Human Systems team, and they view sort of like the foundation of meaning, the atoms of meaning are values. And he has a very unique understanding of values and a unique process and methodology to understand the values of a system that are being lived by and not lived by, and how to redesign a system. So if you have any systems you want to redesign, definitely double click on that session. I took their course. It's amazing. And that being said, the Stoa is based on a gift economy. I view it as a gift for all of us to use in this time of need. If you're inspired to give a gift to the Stoa, and the gift could be anything really, you just go to the website and check out the gift economy at the bottom of the page. All right. Thanks, everyone. Greatly appreciated. Boom.